So this phenomenon is often referred to as the forbidden fruit syndrome, where the more we are denied something, the more we desire it. I'm Heather Grzych, and this is the Wisdom of the Body podcast. This podcast explores the idea of body intelligence as the real key to learning the knowledge of life, or what we call Ayurveda in the ancient language of Sanskrit. We do that by connecting with today's creative leaders and experts who will help you listen to your body, trust your gut, and live in deeper harmony with nature. Come join me as we unlock the golden door to clear, direct perception and become very deep listeners. You can find the Wisdom of the Body podcast on Apple, Spotify, and Stitcher. You can also follow us by joining my email at heathergrzych.com or on Instagram at heathergrzych. I know you're going to love this podcast, so take a second right now to subscribe. Welcome back to another episode of The Wisdom of the Body. Today, we're going to explore an intriguing phenomenon that many of us experience. Why do we always want what we can't have? It could be material possessions or relationships, like that girl, that guy that's so unattainable, or lifestyle choices, this constant desire that we have for what is out of reach can leave us feeling unsatisfied and unfulfilled. We've all experienced it, but fear not, because today we're going to explore why this happens and share some strategies to help overcome this tendency. We'll discuss the energetics of it, and from an Ayurvedic perspective, we'll delve into the concept of the space element and how giving something up can actually act as a catalyst for benevolent surprises. Y'all know I love talking about giving things up. So, have you ever noticed that the moment you can't have something, it just becomes increasingly desirable? You want it that much more. It could be a food, it could be, some object, a person. Maybe something specific comes to mind for you. I've experienced this myself, especially, I've had moments of this with work or in relationships, and I've witnessed it a lot in my kid and all young children. But since I have a little being in my home that I get to watch grow up, I've noticed it a lot. Because if we tell children that they can't have something, they will end up wanting it more than they would if you tell them that they can have it. If it's something that they really want, they have a desire for, it's going to make it that much more desirable to them. So if you want a kid to want something, tell them they can't have it. Tell them they aren't allowed to have it, and then they will want it more. You've probably heard this idea of forbidden fruit. Yeah. So that comes from a biblical reference. It comes from the story of Adam and Eve from the Bible. And I was raised Catholic, but I'm not Catholic, and nor am I a Christian, but I can appreciate a good story to learn from. And I'm saying this for my friends who have an aversion to hearing stories from different religious texts, whether you follow a different religion or because you're an atheist and you think all those religious people are stupid, or whatever your reason is, you hate religion, whatever your reason is. These are just stories. Okay, so that's where we're coming from today. You can watch a movie or you can read a fable to learn from it. And for me, this is the same with biblical stories or stories from any religious text that I could read. So we don't have to take them literally, but we can see what we can learn from them that might help us in our day-to-day lives as humans trying to live on planet Earth. Okay, so if you're with me, let's continue. The connection between the idea of wanting what we can't have and the story of Adam and Eve is rooted in human nature and in this concept of temptation. Because in the story of Adam and Eve, they're the first human beings that were created by the God in this story. And they were placed in this place called the Garden of Eden. And they were given free reign to enjoy everything that they wanted in this garden. It's a really beautiful garden, lots of things going on. They said, hey, God, this God character says, you can have anything you want from this garden, but you are not allowed to eat from the fruit of this tree. And this tree is the tree of knowledge of good and evil. You're not allowed to eat that fruit. You are not allowed to eat the fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Don't do it. And they had everything they needed in this garden. They had all these fruits, all this abundance of fruits. It was a very abundant garden, but they could not resist the temptation to eat from that forbidden tree. They couldn't resist it. So this narrative illustrates that desire to acquire something or an experience that is off limits. Don't go there simply because it's forbidden. There's no, reason why. Don't eat it because. It's just like, don't do it. And it reflects a fundamental aspect of human psychology, which is the allure of what we can't have. So this phenomenon is often referred to as the forbidden fruit syndrome, where the more we are denied something, the more we desire it. So the more we want something and there's some external force or circumstance that prevents us from getting it or keeps taking it further and further away from us, the more we want it. And wanting what we can't have, it can happen for various reasons. As humans, we have a desire for novelty. It gets us excited. The pursuit of power, certain things, can make us want what we can't have. A feeling of exclusion can make us have that scarcity mindset as well, or feeling scarcity. And when we feel some of those things, it can make us want things more as well. And it can also tie into this human inclination of wanting to test boundaries and rebel against authority, right? Because it makes you feel powerful to be able to do that, or it makes you feel enlivened to be able to do that. Anybody who has ever held a yoga pose for a long time, they're at a boundary of their yoga pose and they push past that yoga pose, and there's this sweetness in this little tiny bit of pain. There's this little sweetness that comes from it. So we like to push past our paradigm. It feels good. And this story of Adam and Eve serves as a cautionary tale. It illustrates that there are consequences of succumbing to this desire, because what happens is after eating this forbidden fruit that Adam and Eve weren't supposed to eat, they were actually expelled from the Garden of Eden. They're like, sorry, you're kicked out. You're kicked out of this garden. And what that symbolizes is a loss of innocence. And it symbolizes the introduction of suffering and of mortality into the world. And here we all are today, flailing around, trying to be human. And the story still resonates with so many people, regardless of what religion you identify with, or whether you call yourself an atheist or an agnostic, because it emphasizes this timeless struggle between human desires and our ability to resist temptation. It highlights our tendency to be fascinated by what is forbidden, leading us to yearn for things that are out of reach. And there's some great passages about this idea as well in the Bhagavad Gita. And this kind of experience is very deeply rooted in human nature. Ayurveda can give us a little bit of insight into why this occurs and how you can sort of play with the mechanisms behind it so that you don't have to be a prisoner of your mental desires. Okay, so you could think about this on a psychological level, right? I'm going to talk about it a little bit from the energetic perspective to start, because in Ayurveda, with the 5 elements of space, air, fire, water, and earth, they make up sort of the building blocks of our existence, right? On a simple level, I understand that there's more elements on the periodic table, but you could group those all into these categories of things that are very spacey, things that are very airy, things that have a lot of fire and heat, things that are very watery and fluid and liquid, and things that are very solid, earth element. And today we're going to focus specifically on the space element and its connection to this desire for what we can't have. So if we want to understand this concept, let's take a moment to reflect on how space influences our lives. It represents freedom or potential or openness. And it's the canvas on which all possibilities can manifest. So it's like this blank canvas, and a painter needs a blank canvas to create a masterpiece. And in order for us to create a masterpiece, we need this blank canvas, and we need the space to be able to do that so that our lives can express themselves fully. But if the space element becomes imbalanced, it can lead to feelings of emptiness and craving when there is too much space. So this is where the desire for what we have and what we don't have comes into play. More space can create desire, more desire in some individuals because it has somewhere to move. The desire has somewhere to move. And for other people, more space element can lower desire. And when we perceive a void in ourselves, we seek it. We want to fill it with external objects or experiences. And we're believing that they will bring us fulfillment because they are going to reduce that space. And this is due to our mental grasping mechanism, which may or may not be based on true desire. When I talk about desire, there are mental desires and there are physical desires. We talk about in Ayurveda. You have desires of the mind and desires of the body. And the mental desires are the ones that you don't know if you can trust them. The physical desires, like I am thirsty, you can trust those because your body's not going to lie to you and tell you that you're thirsty if it doesn't need the water. But your mind is so complicated and it's always running based on a paradigm. And a paradigm is oftentimes based on things from the past, all of your conditioning. That's not oftentimes, it is what your paradigm is based on. Then the mental desires are the ones you don't actually know if they're the ones that you should be following. So what you can do is test it, play with things, right? So if you give something up, say you've been chasing something for a really long time, it's not happening, or you're chasing a person or a job or having a baby or whatever it is. So giving something up, what it does is it creates a temporary vacuum. It's a space that gets created in our lives. So if you give something up, this is, I think, I can't explain it very well in physics terms. I can explain it in my easy Ayurveda terms, but it's in this vacuum where you have now this new space. And this is where benevolent surprises can happen. Because when we release what we're grasping for, we create room for new possibilities to enter our lives. And these surprises that align with our highest purpose and bring us actually true joy. Because sometimes we actually want things that we don't really want. Sometimes we want things we wanted 5 years ago. We don't really want them anymore. We don't realize we don't want them anymore until we get them. And then we're like, oh, I didn't actually want that. So when we let go of something, we are recognizing the attachments and cravings that are preventing us from living in alignment with our true selves. And so by intentionally letting go of what we desire that we can't have, we create space for unforeseen blessings to manifest. Now, we don't want to hear that. We don't want to hear that because we want what we want, don't we? So it's important to emphasize that letting go doesn't mean suppressing or denying our desires. Instead, it means acknowledging them and releasing our attachment to those specific outcomes. This is an act of surrender, and it allows the universe to work its magic, and it leads us to experiences that we could not have imagined before. So, for example, let's say that you're deeply attached to a particular career opportunity that eludes you, okay? Instead of fixating on what you can't have, you can choose to surrender and let go of the attachment to that specific opportunity. There's a lot of different ways you can do this, okay? And by creating this space within yourself and in your life, you can allow room for these unexpected opportunities that may bring greater fulfillment and alignment with your purpose and surprise you because they may actually bring you more joy than this other thing thought you wanted. And this may be why sacrifice is part of so many religions, because in principle, if you give something up, you create a space for blessings. And I'm not endorsing any specific kind of sacrifice. I do think these things are very personal and you have to ask your own heart what you desire to release and let go of. I'm not saying you need to go like kill a goat at a ritual site in Waikiki or something like this, or whatever your mind conjures up when I say sacrifice. Or I'm not saying you have to sit and burn sage at 2:00 in the morning and chant to Shiva all night. Those may be ways that you let things go. There are various ways that people let things go. We use cleansing in Ayurveda to let things go. Prayer, lots of different meditation techniques for letting things go. Okay. Now, I know it's hard to let things go because if we let go of our attachment to something, then we won't get it. Now, our attachment to something is not a real attachment. It is an attachment to an idea that does not exist right now. And it's actually a grasping mechanism. And it's not true that we won't get it. Sometimes we're actually grasping for something with a closed hand because we've been grasping for it for so long. Or we're grasping, we haven't opened the hand to actually receive it. So if we stop grasping and we open the hand, then sometimes we can actually, well, no, not sometimes, we will receive it. You can't receive something with a closed hand. So a key aspect of this process is cultivating trust. You have to trust that the universe knows what's best for you. And when you let go, these benevolent surprises are on their way. Yes, it's challenging, especially when we feel pressure to control every aspect of our lives. Guilty of that too. But by surrendering and allowing the space element to work its magic, we tap into the flow of life and we invite these abundant possibilities. One thing I didn't mention today is that I do want to recognize, and it probably needs a whole separate discussion about why we are drawn to what we don't have from a psychological perspective. I kind of mentioned it earlier, but a whole discussion would need to be had about scarcity and how that comes into our lives and what that does to us psychologically. So remember, though, that desire for what we can't have stems from a perceived lack within ourselves. So by consciously giving something up and then embracing the space that follows that, like, oh, I'm not afraid of this. I'm not, like you may go through an emotional response if you give something up, and that's totally great and fine. That's when the space opens up after you have that emotional response. And after you have that, in the space that follows, you have a more fertile ground for growth, a fertile ground for transformation, and a fertile ground for these unexpected blessings. Because if you just keep doing and grasping and trying to get the thing that you can't have, you're going to calcify, you're going to burn out. There's a whole bunch of things that are going to happen if you keep doing that. So you got to let it go. And because we know that the mind affects the body and the body affects the mind, if you work with this on an energetic level, you can influence the mind, and that can influence the body through triggering different physiological responses. When you have thoughts, triggers feelings, and then you have different physiological responses. And also when you have a thought that, this can affect your mind and that can affect your choices, and then you exhibit different behavior. And then that behavior affects your body differently. So just a couple of examples of how just changing your mindset on something can change the physiology and possibly change the physical body in addition to the mental body. This stuff works. So as you navigate your own desires and attachments, I invite you to consider the power of playing with space. So play with the space element, embrace this beauty of letting go, and be open to benevolent surprises that await you on the other side. Thank you for joining me today on this episode of The Wisdom of the Body, where we explore mind, body, spirit, health, and body intelligence in our everyday lives. I hope this discussion on the space element from an Ayurvedic perspective and why we always seem to want what we can't have has sparked some new insights and some new ideas for you to play with things in your own life. Until next time, embrace that space and possibilities and those blessings that await you. If you are embarking on a fertility journey and are ready to have your mind blown about what your body is really capable of and how it's impacted by the environment, then check out my book, The Ayurvedic Guide to Fertility. You can actually download the introduction to the book for free on my website at heathergrzych.com. That's Heather, GRZYCH.com. Read the intro for free and then buy the rest of this fertility enlightening book pretty much anywhere books are sold. I get so excited. I get this kind of goosebump feeling when I get a booking from a new client that I haven't met yet. And I get so excited because I know that somebody has made a decision to go really, really, really deep into their healing. Because I know that Ayurveda is not a quote unquote normal thing that many people have access to, at least not in the United States where I live. So I know that when someone books with me, that they've really made a decision that they want to go deep into their healing. And so you could do that on my website at heathergrzych.com. That's Heather, GRZYCH.com. You can book me for either a Ayurveda consultation if you're ready to dive in, or you can also book me for a 15-minute connection call if you're not sure where to go yet. I do have a couple offerings that are not on my website, and we could talk about that. So I look forward to meeting you. Thank you for tuning in and dropping in with us today. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. I really want to hear your feedback. To learn more about my work, visit heathergrzych.com. That's Heather, GRZYCH.com. And meet me here next time on The Wisdom of the Body.